from my end too.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the conversation series on mediation created with an aim and vision to promote mediation in the world around us and to talk about mediation from the perspective of a common person. The short legal disclaimer remains the same and it's there on the YouTube handle. This session is being recorded for wide circulation. It is advised kindly do not disclose any confidential information as the channel will not be able to take any responsibility for any breach of confidentiality by guest speakers. Let me introduce the guest speaker for today, Ms. Elizabeth M. Franz, a professional mediator, professor at University of Colorado Boulder, designer of Humans Universal Mediation Model, HUMM. Wow, we will talk about that. And founder of 3 interconnected collectives that are transforming the way people learn, practice, and apply conflict resolution. She's founded and led 3 organizations: Mediators Practice, trains aspiring mediators through an immersive 60-hour industry standard program that emphasizes hands-on practice, skill drills, and the HUMM model, Humans Universal Mediation Model, a signature approach to mediation. So I know what I have to ask you for profiles. But before that, let me introduce you properly. Humans Mediate provides, that's another initiative, which provides high quality neutral mediation services for individuals, families, teams, and communities facing challenging conversations. Humans Collaborate is a consulting co-op offering listening tours, facilitation, coaching, and workshop to organizations looking to build stronger internal collaboration and relational health. That's, that's very impressive. With over a decade of experience in mediation training and facilitation, she is passionate about growing the field of alternative dispute resolution and making conflict resolution more accessible, human-centered, and skill-based. So if you're curious, becoming a mediator, needs support, navigating conflict, or want to build a collaboration in organizations, you would love to connect through, I think you are on LinkedIn, right?
I am.
So that's great. So welcome on board, Elizabeth. It's a pleasure to have you here with us. And before we move further, and I forget, so HUMM model, what it is about?
Yeah.
The 60
So it's the Humans Universal Mediation Model, HUMM. We affectionately call it HUM. So that's a nice acronym for us.
hum.
Yeah, we're humming along.
And that in Hindi, you know what it means? It
no, what does it
means
mean?
we. It means we. So it's very symbolic. Hum
It
in
means like
Hindi
three, like
means we.
FREE.
Yes. No, we. Uh, we both or
Oh,
we
we
as a
like
team.
together.
Yes.
Oh my
So
gosh.
it's really hum. That word itself, I think, in India also it will sound much good
Oh my God. I love that so much. I'm going to be saying that all the time now because it is a model for us together.
for
Um,
us together.
that is so beautiful. Thank you for telling me that. So it is
Lovely.
like one of the things that I found because I've been trained in the transformative, facilitative. My first mediation training was in the inclusive model. And then I've been a part of a couple other mediation trainings that were facilitative models. I also got trained in I said transformative. I think I said that. So
Yes.
I was
Transformative.
interested in what I was seeing kind of in the world of mediators is people get their training and they just assume that that's how everyone mediates, right? That the way they were trained is the way everybody mediates. That's not the case. There's a very wide variety of different ways to mediate. And I have to thank Tara West. She wrote the book. Oh gosh, let me look it up so I make sure I say her name right, the name of the book right. Um, Tara West is a transformative mediator and a researcher, and she wrote a book. Tara West, let me see. I think it's called, I'm going to look this up. So, The Mediator's Approach. And she's a transformative mediator. She's very transparent about that in her book that she's biased towards that. I will model that back and say I'm very biased towards my hum model. But I appreciate her work and kind of looking at the different mediation models and saying, hey, it's a model when there is like a written documentation or like some way to say, this is how the model is supposed to be practiced. Here's our baseline of what the designer expected of like how mediation looks. And so after studying all these different models and practicing for a decade, I felt like none of those models quite met the mark for me in my practice. So I started the very long process and collaborative process with other mediators to design a mediation model that is not just more accessible for participants in mediation, but also accessible for mediators to learn. In addition, I made sure that the design of the process, it's much more protocol based. There's a script for what the mediators say. And because it's repeatable and measurable, and all the mediators I train and hire and people use in my business is we're consistent. So we're able to honor self-determination because our clients know what to expect from the mediation process, and we're able to actually measure how we're doing. And that also lends itself to research. So I just found that there's a lack of research in terms of mediation steps and processes to determine if they're actually effective. And part of the reason it's very hard to research mediation is because everyone's mediating in a different way. And so what my model's done is said, okay, because all the mediators who practice the hum model are doing it the same way, it's the same set of skills, it's a script, we can actually repeat it and put it to research. So one of my trainees from the past, she's getting her PhD, and we're kind of working together to figure out a process to do the research. But she was saying to me that she appreciated that my model, because it's repeatable and measurable and more protocol based, that it lends itself to being able to be researched versus other models that are rely too much, I think, on mediator discretion.
Okay, so what I understood is that there's a 60-hour, a different kind of a model where you have which is helpful to the mediators also, and it redefines the steps in mediation. Have I corrected? Got it.
Yes. So the hum model, any mediation model is just saying these are the steps the mediators are taking. And so you can communicate that clearly to participants. You can tell them this is what's going to happen and this is what's going to happen. And that way they can opt in or out of those steps. But if you have no model and no structure, then you can't study it because you can't repeat it, but also you might be violating self-determination because people can't opt in. They don't know what they're signing up for. They're just kind of at the whim of whatever the mediator decides in the moment. And if people knew that, then they could consent to that. But if there isn't a model and you can't communicate that there's such a thing as a model, then participants can't opt in or out. And then practitioners have a hard time co-mediating, right? Because if you think mediation is one thing and I think mediation is something else, and we try to co-mediate, we end up in conflict about how to mediate during the participants' conflict, which is not helpful. Whereas all the mediators who use the hum model, we borrowed this from the inclusive model because the inclusive model, all the co-mediators do it the same way. We're on the same page, right? The co-mediators know what's happening, know what our skill sets are, know where the boundaries are. And that can actually really soothe participants because we're confident and we're collaborating well.
So that would also mean, that on-job conflict and more research work.
Yes, there's a lot more work to be done. And I hope that when we design our experiments and collect our data, that could be a model for other models to also observe and research theirs. But I think, some models are going to have a hard time being researched because each session looks so drastically different from each other. And I'm trying to make a distinction, like for participants, the people in conflict, the mediation will always look different, right? Because every set of people, every conflict has its own thumbprint, right? It's very different. But the mediator's behavior, the process we use, that should look consistent, right? It should stay similar to all the previous sessions and future sessions. And if there's no similarity, then you can't actually measure effectiveness. You can't see like which interventions are effective or not. So again, my model is probably on the spectrum, the most structured model that I found. Because I created it, I was craving that structure, that predictability, that measurable consistency. And so that's why I designed my own model for that. So I have a like 70, I think it's like maybe 80 pages now manual. I designed the curriculum around that. I train, apprentice, and certify mediators in that model. And then our case management process, our process with our clients is all tied to the hum model because then they know what's going to happen. They have some degree of predictability around what will happen in the mediation. And just neuroscience wise, our brains are prediction machines, right? Our
Yes,
brains feel the most comfortable when the brain can predict what's going to happen next. And so, you have the brain struggling with conflict there, you're in your amygdala. It feels like fight, flight, or freeze when you're in conflict. But the process, if it's not predictable, it makes that worse because your brain is trying to find some stability, some predictability. But when our clients come in, we say, these are the steps, these are what the mediators are going to do. And in fact, that's what happens. Then the brain can relax a little bit because it's like, oh, they did say this was going to happen. And I know what's going to happen next. And I know what to expect from my mediators. So any kind of anxiety or fear that I have doesn't have to be both for the mediators and the co-participant. It can just be about the conversation I'm going to have and not about the process.
so when you are talking about, I was just listening keenly. When we are talking about mediation, we are also talking about something that is more skill based. That's how I see. Because you can have different models, but can you really, I mean, the skills are, I think, intrinsic. The temperament, I think, is intrinsic. Can we shape up the temperament and the skill? Skill, I think we can upscale people because when you are into training, when you're co-mediating, when you're observing, you get to know. Uh, I think that. What's your opinion about it?
Yeah. I was just having this conversation with Sarah. She runs the Better Business Bureau mediation arbitration program in like my region. I'm in Colorado. And I liked her, I'm going to use her word because she said, there's soft skills, which what you're talking about, the tone of our voices, our body, what is it? Our body language, our way of like our energy showing up calm and grounded, right? And those are valuable. They're very valuable. They can be practiced, they can be learned. What I would add to those are the technical mechanical skills that come with conflict, understanding like the difference between like, yes, I can drive my car and there's like kind of an art to that, I guess. Like I have a distinct way I drive my car. I'm a defensive driver, but the mechanics, once you open the hood and see what's in the mechanics, the engine runs a specific way, right? Like it has mechanics, it has physics involved. Like there's something objective about that. And so I think you need both. And for me, with the hum model, I really borrowed from the inclusive model, and we use inclusive listening, inclusive reflecting. We use open-ended questions and process mapping, and that's it. Like I tell the mediators, there's actually a very narrow lane where you can travel that is neutral. Most things are not, right?
Yes.
And the value add of mediators is that we come in and we don't judge people. We're not attached to the outcome. We're not trying to move things one way or another. We're not taking sides. We don't give advice. We don't make suggestions. That's neutral. And what happens when you use the hum model and the inclusive model is, yes, there are the soft skills of your tone of voice and how you sit and how you take your notes. Then there's the mechanical skills of, hey, you have to stay in this small, narrow lane of things that you can do. And there is a way we reflect. There is a way we ask open-ended questions. There are specific things we listen for. And I think it's the pairing of those mechanics and that discipline around staying in that neutral lane and doing the things that contribute to collaboration, paired with the soft skills that get us to, professionalism, that get us to being effective, which is the most important thing to me. It has to work. Whereas I think other models, or I've seen some mediators rely too much on the soft skills, those can only get you so far. right? I can be a very good driver, but at some point I have to change the oil, right? That's just like, otherwise the engine won't run. And I think that you can have a lot of soft skills. It will get you very far. But then if you want to actually resolve conflict and meet people's needs, you're going to have to address the mechanics of conflict. And that does require specialized skill set that we practice in the training curriculum I teach at the university and adults through my business.
When you were talking about neutrality, what occurred to me is that why is neutrality, and when you talked about the thin narrow lane, why is neutrality so important? And when we talk about from the perspective of a common person, because I'm taking it to there,
Yeah.
why then I come to why mediation is necessary and when mediation is necessary, because we both are here to promote mediation also among the common people. And when we are talking about neutrality, uh, otherwise there's a feeling in people, that if the conflict has started, we can always talk to friends, we can always call in some elderly person in the family, things can be sorted out. And if it cannot be sorted out by family and friends, then I mean, people generally have this, then we have only the court or the litigation coming that way. So here comes the role of neutrality and the narrow path that you were talking about. Why it is important for mediation. Let's discuss
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I mean, let's keep with the car metaphor. So, you know, it is very easy to talk to friends and family. Everyone will have an opinion about why your car isn't running correctly, right? If your car is making noise or acting up, you can ask your neighbor, you can ask your friends, but there is nothing that replaces going to a car mechanic, right? Like there is nothing that is going to supersede
Love
the
that
value
analogy.
of going to someone who knows how to do it, right? And, again, there are people who are not, official car mechanics, but who have worked with cars for a very long time. And they understand the mechanics of how the car is, how the engine works, right? And so there's nothing that's going to supersede a mediator. We are the car mechanic, right? We have not just worked with conflict, like we've been working on cars forever, right? We've been working on conflict. We've seen over and over again people come in and go through the process, and we're guiding them through it. You want a guide who can help you navigate that, right? I don't know how to change the oil in my car. I need a mechanic to do it because they know how to navigate my engine. I do not, right? Um, and so I think that opinions and people's anecdotes, oh, this is what happened to my car when it broke. This is what happened to my conflict. Those are valuable. I'm saying that those are valuable things. They can get you so far. Like soft skills can get you so far, but you do still need the mechanic. You still do need the person who's done it before, who knows how to guide you through it, because that's what's going to get you to actual resolution, actually get your needs met. And the neutrality is so important because, it, this is the other thing I will say about that is the people who know the situation, the conflict the best are the people in it, right? When they come to me as a mediator, I just met them. I don't know their life. I don't know the history of what's happened. I also don't have to live with the consequences of what comes out of mediation, right? They leave, I'm done, right? And so I think one of the things we need to do as a field and as just also society is say, hey, we can trust people with their own lives, with their own relationships, with their own conflict. And it is, in fact, when you trust them that they're able to step up and do the good work, right? But if you kind of say, oh, you don't know that, I'm the professional, I know, that is not only disrespecting them and saying, I don't accept that you're an expert at your own life. I met you just now, but I know you better. No, I don't. Right. And so I think so much of neutrality for me is taking myself out of the center and putting the participants in the center and saying, hey, you have to figure this out. The solution that you come up with will always be 10 times better than what I can because you know the situation better than I ever will. And you're going to have to live with this. You have the actual stakes here. If you agree or not, I get paid either way,
I, I,
you know?
I'm losing you.
Oh, no. Are
I
you
think
still
I
there?
lost.
Okay, you froze for me, but I'm still here. You there? Uh-oh.
It's okay. So, like where we were and we were talking. So you were telling about neutrality and why it is important. We lost you for a moment.
Yes. Um, I think that, I mean, okay, I think that there's a debate in the field. I'm aware of it. People will say I'm impartial instead of neutral, or they'll say like omnipartial, or they'll say neutrality is being complicit. And they have those opinions. I listen to them. I think they're interesting. In practice, what I have found is that when a mediator, there's a couple things. There's neutrality of the outcome, like, hey, I cannot be attached to the outcome. It has to come from the participants. I think we can all agree on that. There's the like taking sides, right? Saying like anything that I say or do could be perceived as taking a side or being against somebody. And in a conflict, if somebody, not even just in conflict, but in general, if somebody feels like you're against them, they get defensive. If someone feels like you're on their side in a conflict, they get emboldened. And now their behavior is worse than if I didn't take a side to begin with, right? And that's a fine line. Like there are so many things that could be interpreted as you're for or against me. And so you have to be very careful about what you say. I think that the other piece for me is not giving advice or suggestions, right? Because it's not my life. I don't know what they've tried. And the advice and suggestions that I have, they're informed by my life. They're informed by my bias. They're informed by my culture, by my conditioning. They don't have the same conditioning. They don't have necessarily the same culture. And so for me to add a suggestion or give advice, to me, that's an imposition. I'm imposing myself. And if they want somebody's opinion or suggestions that you said earlier, you can get them. It's not that advice and suggestions are inaccessible. Everyone in their lives are very, like, if you ask anybody, they're happy to give you their opinion, right? They don't know you, they'll tell you what they think, right? Your family, your friends, they'll tell you what they think. But the mediator is saying, look, that's not what you asked me to do. You asked me to hold neutral ground, to walk you through a process. That's it, right? And again, that's honoring self-determination. If you asked me to give you advice and suggestions, it's on me to say, that's not something I can offer. That's not something I do as a mediator. If you would like advice or suggestions, there are experts who have written plenty of books. There's YouTube. There's your friends and family. There's literally someone walking by right now. I'm sure if you ask them, they would tell you what they think, right? That's just not what I offer, because as soon as I start giving advice and suggestions, it can sound very innocent. Like the example I give is there's a parenting plan and mom and dad are there and they're trying to figure out what to do about meals. And I really value nutrition. So I'll be like, oh, well, are you getting all your macros? And like, that sounds innocent. Like, I'm just suggesting a completely scientifically backed, healthy suggestion, right? Totally innocent. But guess what? They've been fighting about macros for years, and mom is all about macros, and dad thinks it's a load of crap. And so now, without even realizing it, I've stepped in it. I am now officially on mom's side. Dad will not hear anything from me anymore. And mom will feel emboldened to push macros, even though he's never going to like that. And so I'm I'm just giving them a totally scientifically backed, valid suggestion. But now the value I could have added, where we could just set that aside and have an actual conversation where someone isn't feeling emboldened or defensive, I've just messed that up. So like I always kind of tell my trainees, my students, that like neutrality, I picture it as like in this very fragile, thin glass globe, this glass sphere. And
Yes.
at any little nick in it, if you drop it, it shatters and you can't put it back together. After you ruin your neutrality in a mediation, it's over, right? And so because it's so fragile, it's also so valuable. And so you need to stay in that lane of things that won't break your neutrality. And if you can leave a mediation with your neutrality, then you've won the game, right? Then you've done the proper professional thing they've asked you to do. Do I think neutrality should apply to things outside of mediation? No. I don't think you should be neutral about political things. I don't think you should be neutral about, social justice. Have your opinions, have your advocacy. But in this particular part of life where you're holding space for other people's challenging conversations, you need to stay neutral. You need to keep your opinions, what you think is appropriate or not, out the door, which is also why my model does not include ground rules. The mediators are not referees. We do not judge or tell them how to behave. We accept participants as they are. And that acceptance is actually what allows them to de-escalate, right? If you tell someone you're talking a lot, do you think they talk less? If you tell someone to calm down, do they get calmer? No, right? But when you look at someone and you see somebody who has a lot to say and you hear them out, you let them say what they need to say. When you let somebody get escalated and have that authentic expression of how intense this is for them, and you acknowledge that intensity, then they calm down. But if you try to control that and say, I'm sorry, we're not allowed to yell in mediation, they're gonna yell, they're gonna get louder, right? Because they're yelling because it's really that serious. They're really that upset. And if you shut that down or make them feel wrong for that expression, they're not going to continue to explain how they're feeling. They're not going to be open to anything. They're going to just feel shut down, or they're going to get even louder. And so for me, I think neutrality is also that non-judgmental piece, accepting people. I think we say, oh, let's be non-judgmental. I'm like, okay, let's take that a step further and say, let's accept people as they are and say, however my participants show up in mediation, that's the right way for them. And I can accept that. If it comes with cursing and yelling and name calling, okay, that's how they need to show up in that moment. And when you put rules and restrictions on people, there's this thing called reactance. So it's a psychological phenomenon where if you take someone's freedom away, they actually get more agitated and they try to get that back. So I don't know if you saw those videos during COVID when people were like losing their minds on planes. People were like yelling, there were fights breaking out on planes. It was upsetting, right? And these things still happen. But if you think about it just psychologically, the second you enter an airport, you lose a lot of freedom, right? I have to show my ID. I have to check in. Once I go through security, I can't get out. I can't bring someone in who doesn't have a ticket, right? Like once you get on that plane, even more of your freedom is restricted, right? Because you're in a flying metal tube in the air with 100 other people, right? And some people are so sensitive to that. And I think in COVID, we had a lot of freedoms removed, rightfully, for public health. But I think people were just really, there's this reactance, there's this kind of pushback on being, freedom being taken away. And in mediation, if you try to restrict people and say, you have these rules, you can't say that, you can't do that, they're actually going to act out more. They're going to push back on that. They're going to bounce back. Whereas if you don't, then it's easier. So you think about like, the beach ball in the water. And if you try to push a beach ball into the water, right, it will pop up, right? Because it doesn't want to be underwater, right? It's buoyant. So if you push it down, if you push participants into the water, they will fly back out. But if you just let them float, we're okay, right? The beach ball is actually very calm. It will roll around. It will go in the wind. It won't like come up in a way and smack you in the face, So that's how I think of reactance, as pushing that, beach ball down into the water and saying, look, that is not comfortable for the beach ball or me, right? Just let it float and it will be better.
When I talk about mediation from the perspective of a common person, and I talk about litigation or someone telling me what my dispute should and how it should be, So what in your model or in any mediation from the perspective of a common person, what is the difference, and when, why is there?
Yeah.
Let's
I'll
talk
start
about
with
that.
just the perception of the court. So really, unless something happens like a divorce or you get sued, most people don't really experience the court, right? Some people can go their whole lives and not get divorced and not get sued and really not have to engage with litigation. And they're so lucky, right? But when people find themselves in a situation, I think there's this assumption that when you go to court, you get to tell your story and the judge hears you out and they're very thoughtful about weighing the evidence and they'll hear your whole complaint and they'll understand it holistically, right? And then people get to court and it's not that. The judge may ask a few questions. Often if you have attorneys, they speak for you. You're not speaking to the judge directly. And the courts are not set up to hear the whole story, right? They're set up to just hear the things that the law has the ability to impact, right? So if it's not a law, if it, it's not illegal for you to hurt my feelings, right? So the courts can't decide. And again, if you hurt my feelings, that's a very subjective thing. Did you really do something? Am I too sensitive? Who knows, But the courts are set up for, okay, there are these laws. I'm looking for these specific things in evidence. There are these specific conditions I have to meet to make a ruling. And so people go to court and they leave dissatisfied because they expected this holistic conversation about this is how it affected me and this is how I feel and this is the relationship. And the judge is just asking, does your case meet this criteria? Yes or no? Does it meet this criteria? Yes or no? Did this happen? Yes or no? Okay, based on that, this is what the law says needs to happen. I have some discretion as a judge, but also a judge, once they make a ruling, you're stuck with that. You have to do what they said, or else they will take the power of the state and force you to do it, right? You could get fined, you could get fees, you could end up in jail, you could end up in prison, you could have a background check that's no longer something that you can get a job because they'll see that you defied the courts, right? So I think that that's what's kind of happening in the courts. And again, I appreciate courts. I think there are definitely things that they need to take care of, like, contracts, property, crimes. I'm very happy that they reinforce the Constitution, right? But interpersonal stuff, it's not designed for that, right? And they try because, again, they are there and people know they're there and they come to them with those problems. And so they're trying to be responsive to that, but it's not a system designed for that. Whereas mediation at its core is designed for people to just talk to each other, right? And a mediator is not making a decision about what will happen. They're not pushing a ruling on you. And mediators do not have the power of the state. We cannot send you to jail. We cannot garnish your wages. We cannot fee you. And mediators are confidential. The court, there is a public record. There is a public record. And in each jurisdiction, it's different. But if I want to know if you went to court, I could look up your name in a court roster and find it. If someone wants to know that you went to mediation, there's nothing. They cannot find that out. And at least in my state and most states in the US, there's mediation confidentiality that protects what you say in mediation. So I think people think, oh, the courts are confidential. They're not. They think the court is going to hear their whole story and look at this in a holistic, emotional way. They will not. That's not their job. And they don't know. And I think as mediators, we could do a better job communicating that actually that's our job, right? Our job is to deal with the squabbling. Our job is to hear whatever you want to talk about, whether or not there's legal precedent for it or not, right? It's just that I think people don't know about us or are just not as accessible because, the court is, at least in the US, it's a third branch of government. Everyone knows that. If you live in a community, there's a courthouse. There isn't like a mediation house to just drive by. I wish there was, but there's not. And I think that also mediation, I guess, is coming from someone who's teaching at a university. I think it's been over intellectualized. I think it's been kind of pushed to the realm of theory when mediation is the legacy of all of the villages, all the human communities in the past. The courts are English. They're from England, right? At least in the US and India. And actually, mediation is an indigenous practice. It is something that our ancestors did and that we inherited. And I think people also think that mediation comes from the courts. It does not. We work with the courts because we also work in dispute resolution. But I guess the last thing I'll say is a metaphor. My partner came up with the best metaphor. He was like, lawyers being mediators are like lumberjacks being vegetable gardeners. And it's like, yes, because, okay, yes, a lumberjack and a vegetable garden, yes, they work outside. Yes, they work with plants, right? But a lumberjack works with one type of plant, a tree, and it does one thing, cuts them down, right? A vegetable gardener is growing a variety of plants. It's trying to create food. It's a creative process, right? And with mediation, the courts are a competitive institutional practice, right? Mediation is a collaborative
And
unity practice, right? And so, yes, lawyers and mediators, we work with disputes, we work with people, but the philosophy, the way we're considering how to do things is as different as a lumberjack and a vegetable gardener. And it's not that, we have multitudes in us, right? A lumberjack could certainly also have a vegetable garden at home. A vegetable garden could certainly cut a tree in their backyard, right? But when you start somewhere, that is conditioning. When you go to law school, you're there for many years, right? There's a lot of training, a lot of conditioning, a lot of philosophy that is reinforced that then you have to unlearn if you're going to do mediation. And I would say that I thought I was going to be an attorney myself, but when I did mediation, it fit me better. And I felt it was more effective for the interpersonal kinds of conflict that I want to be involved in. So I'm not against attorneys. I wanted to be one. I hired an attorney to work on my co-op. I enjoy their skill set, but I think it's important for the public and practitioners to understand that there is a difference and that if you want someone to just consider the legal ramifications, if you just want someone to make a decision for you, if you just want it to be over, maybe the courts are a good idea, right? If you're willing to wait for as long as it takes to get your hearing, and as long as you're willing to pay all the fees, and as long as you're willing to go through their steps. But if you want to actually resolve it, if you actually have needs that you want to get met, if there are things, and there's always things outside of legal kind of realm, like legal questions, then mediation is where you need to go. And so I think we could do a better job communicating that. I think people could have better access to mediation. And, that's something that I'm working on. I'm trying to make like a quiz so someone can kind of self-assess what type of dispute resolution makes sense for them. I use the term
one,
appropriate. Hmm?
sorry. I
Oh, no,
thought
you're okay.
you
I
bring
use the
it.
term appropriate dispute resolution instead of alternative dispute resolution. Alternative kind of makes the law the center of the universe, and we're just all the extras to that, or the alternative. I think appropriate dispute resolution, to say ADR, is better because it says each case, each dispute, each person should find what method is appropriate for them. And that might be litigation, it might be negotiation, it might be mediation, it might be an evaluation, it might be arbitration, it might be restorative justice. But each of those methods come with a set of tools, come with a set of philosophies. And I think that, someone should be able to see the menu and decide which one is going to fit their preferences.
Where,
And now
when you talk about that, I will stop you there for some time.
Mhm.
When you talk about seeing the menu, what image I get in my eye is that a mediation facility could almost be like a multi-specialty hospital. When you're coming with your
Mhm.
trauma, at
Yeah,
one
and
point,
I forget the name of the person because I just went to the ACR conference, and Bush, who like was one of the creators of the transformative model. I'll have to look at my notes, but he said that there was a lawyer, like an academic, some guy, someone who was very steeped in the knowledge of this, said that what he imagined was a multi-door courthouse, where if you go to the courthouse, there's a door to litigation, there's a door to different processes. And I think that that's what we need, right? Like, same way a restaurant
yes,
is a menu, because not everyone wants to eat the same thing. There's not a restaurant that I know of that just says, we only have this one dish. That's it, right? You don't go to a restaurant and they say, well, our favorite dish is spaghetti, so everyone here eats spaghetti. That's it. Even the places like Chipotle that have, like, you can get a burrito, you can get a burrito bowl, you can get different types of meat. There are options, even though it's all kind of limited, right? There's not a ton of options. And I think with mediation, one of the things that I teach in my class, I have a whole day where we just talk about ADR. And I have these different kind of qualities, the different criteria, the different components of each type of the major ADR methods. There's a lot more than I list, but just I took the major ones. And what I want to create is just a quiz where someone could go through and say, okay, if I'm someone, for example, one metric is participant control and practitioner control. Who has more control, right? If you're somebody who really wants a lot of control over your process, then mediation's the place to go. But if you're somebody who wants a attorney and a judge, the practitioners to have more control, and you want to just, go with what they say, then courts are better for you. Because if you go to mediation, we're going to be like, what do you want to do? And you're going to say, I don't care. What do you want me to do? And it's like, we're in the wrong place. Right. So even on just that, giving people the knowledge that, like, hey, there is a spectrum of how much control and autonomy you will have and how much the practitioner will have. Where on that spectrum would you prefer to be? And if you prefer to be on this end, litigate. On the other end, mediate. In between, there's lots of options for you, right? But I think
When,
that we haven't had that
yeah,
conversation.
when, when do we, when does a normal common person decide that conflicts are going to be inevitable? They are going to be a part of life.
Yeah.
So, especially, I'm more concerned about couples. Many couples going for divorces these days. Many people going for separation these days, and who are going to be suffering, the junior citizens, the children. So,
Yeah.
when I think when is the correct time, let's discuss for the common person
Yeah.
to think about a mediation service to be before conflicts turn into disputes, before conflicts turn into a legal battle. What should be done and when should we, take a side?
The short answer is they
My
can
clue,
mediate anytime. At any time, they
my
should.
clue before they, I think probably before they go for their pre-wedding photo shoots, I think they should really decide about a mediation service
Yeah.
which is going to handle their conflict, because that's how I feel. This is a very important
Yeah.
aspect, and people just don't think about it. They think that's
Mhm.
going to be a rosy picture, a Cinderella who's now found their prince, or
Yeah.
when life that is going to be so beautiful.
Yeah.
But conflicts, when they turn into disputes, and when the disputes become so very harsh on the life, that they end up in courthouse. So, do you think that that's a good idea, that young couples who are about to marry, before they go for their, probably that's what I feel, before they go for their jewelry
Yeah.
designing or clothes, they should think about a mediation service? Because when we were talking that, neutrality is so important. It's not going to be your friends who are going to help you there. So,
Yeah. I'll
what
say
do you
two.
think about
Yeah.
it?
I'll say two things. I think one, that mediation and court and dispute resolution, people think of it as things you only use when there is conflict, when there is a fight, when there is a problem. And I'm really trying to advocate for mediation is for any challenging conversation. You can be deeply in love and have a great relationship, and you are still going to be collaborating. And there are challenging conversations to have, and you can get support with those. And what I tell people is, hey, when was the last time you talked to anybody, but also especially the people that matter most to you in your life, for 2 hours? When was the last time you sat down and had a focused conversation with them for 2 hours? You've gone to dinner with them, you've had fun, casual chats, you go on dates, but when was the last time you sat down and said, okay, but let's seriously talk about all of the components to sharing a life together, right? And so for me, I wish that, in the matchmaking process and the dating process, that
Yes.
you are sitting down and having this proactive conversation around, hey, what are your values? When you picture us having kids, do you picture us having kids at all? Do you not picture that? How many are you thinking? What matters to you? Like, I think parenting plans, I wish people would mediate before they got pregnant. And like,
Yes.
right when they're starting, you should
Yes.
mediate, because if you see me earlier in the process, you won't need me later, right? And if you do need me, I'm still there, right? I don't go away, but I just think that I've done so many parenting plans, so many divorces, so many breakups, and mediation is valuable there. right? I think that people get a more holistic treatment of all the ways they're going to separate, how that looks like very intentionally. But I think that all of those people, I think if you had come to me before you got married, if you had come to me before you got pregnant, we wouldn't be here. There would be less suffering. You would have had met your needs in a better way. That communication would have allowed you to know if this is someone you want to be a co-parent with or someone you want to be married to. But I think that, biologically, we're wired like in that honeymoon phase to kind of look past all of that. And I will say that myself and my partner, I've had him mediate with me a lot, right? And I mean, I'm a mediator and I use it myself. He also was courting me for 20 years. So I had a really tough vetting process to finally say yes to him. And when I did, I was like, we need to mediate. And so many of the decisions and so many of the conversations we had in those 20 years of friendship and in mediation, it makes it a smoother, we have very smooth sailing. We haven't had a single big fight. We don't yell at each other. There's no putting each other down, because before we said, let's combine our lives, let's become interdependent, there was a deep understanding of each other. And then we had those 2 hour, sessions at a time of mediation to have those conversations. So I think what I'm trying to say is for people, don't think of mediation as like you go to the courthouse and a professional does the stuff. You should think of it as there is a conversation that I want to have with somebody, whether that's just, hey, let's collaborate when we love each other and everything's great, or hey, we need to break up. At any time in that cycle, there's challenging conversations that need to be had. They are challenging. They are hard. They are challenging and hard because we don't see examples of these conversations. They're happening privately, right? You don't see your parents having those conversations. You don't see your parents' friends. You don't see anyone in your community having these conversations. We don't see them in movies. We don't see them in TV. They're not written in books.
Yes.
They're not on YouTube, right? They're happening quietly, privately, confidentially. And mediation is a space where you can have that quiet, confidential, serious conversation with someone supporting you through that process. So instead of trying to go it alone, and then again, we might try, like, let me bring it up, but then you kind of back down and you change the subject, right? In mediation, the mediators help you stay focused. Hey, we really do have to talk about where we will live, how we will split expenses, who will be working, if we have kids or not, what are we doing with our careers? I think we
Or
have
how we will manage our conflict.
how do we
Because
manage our conflict? And
they
I
are
think
going
saying,
to be
how
inevitable.
we exactly. And I think how you manage your conflict, how my partner and I, who are deeply in love and having a great time, how we've managed it is we go to mediation when we're like, okay, there's something that's not working. And I think the other thing that I'll say about this is there's a working definition I have for conflict, and it's simply when needs are not met. That could be my needs, that could be your needs, it could be both of ours. But if in a
And
relationship, one person's
and
needs are
we
going unmet, there's conflict.
yes, and if we don't allow people or allow our relationships to work it out, then obviously it's going to be so bad that it's going to land up in something that obviously it is going to be messy. So I think uh, probably when wedding planners are there, or
Yeah,
when matrimonial sites are there, I think they should collaborate with mediation centers also. That this
I
is what
totally
you
agree.
need to decide. It's
I
not
totally
the
agree.
jewelry, it's not the cake, it's not the flowers, it's not the venue. It's this also that needs
Yeah. All
attention.
of that's really distracting. And I think if wedding planners or matchmakers could start referring their clients to mediation and treating it as a normal thing, it's not that I'm
Yes,
referring you to mediation because I think you guys are a bad couple. It's just that, hey, it's best for all couples to go to mediation, and the mediator can guide them through that conversation and kind of go through like these are the things that happen in life, right, that are
yes,
inevitable, right?
yes.
And let's talk about those things so that you have an understanding up front. I also think it's the same. And I know, like, I really like Ayurveda from India. It's very much like here, there's the way medicine is in the Western world is very responsive. It's like, I'm only going to treat you if you are sick, right? And very much in Asia, Filipinos, Indians, right? The whole continent, there's a preventative attitude. Like,
Yes,
it's better to take care of your health every day in little ways than it is to allow yourself to get so sick that you end up in the hospital and it's a bigger deal, right?
Yes.
And I think that, when I think of relationships, mediators are the doctors for relationships. And your relationship is important to your well-being, your health. And if you neglect your relationships, if you let conflict just fester under the surface forever, you will eventually get a heart attack and end up in the hospital, right?
Yes.
But if you can have those conversations, you can have support along the way. If you can be proactive, right? Exercise, eat good food, right? If you can communicate, spend time in mediation, pay attention to other people's needs, express your needs, then your relationship can have this longevity. It can be healthy, it can be resilient, so that if something happens, you can make it through. Mediation is like part of maintaining those relationships. And so if a relationship is really important to you and there's a challenging conversation you want to have, mediate, get that support, because once you've mediated one time, you learn that conflict is resolvable. You learn how to
And
express
it's
yourself, how to
very
hear
normal.
exactly. It's totally normal. And then
And it's very normal.
you can
Absolutely
keep
normal.
up those habits, right? Like I saw a nutritionist one time and she was like, this is, your specific stuff. This is what you should eat. And now that's how I cook and I'm healthier. I feel better when I eat because I went to a professional who knew how to do it. She gave me advice on my situation. She walked me through a process and then I applied that to my life. Mediators, instead of giving advice, we just let you experience being in a collaborative environment. We hold space for you to actually express yourself and to hear somebody else. And that lays a foundation for better practices throughout that relationship. So with my partner, we haven't had any big blowups, but because, we mediated our hobbies. He likes camping, I like dancing, right? We made a plan about like how we will go dancing and how we will also go camping, right? Now, if something really big happens, like there's a bigger conflict around our health or our families, or if we have children or not, right? We know that we can go to mediation. We can have that conversation. And when we need it most, it won't feel like, oh my gosh, what is this? We've never done this before. It's like we've done it before. We're comfortable, right? And so now when we really need it, it's there for us. So, I think that there's a lot of challenging conversations that people go it alone. And those conversations have a huge impact on your life and your relationships. And if you could get support in those conversations, why wouldn't you? Just get it.
Yes.
You don't need it for every conversation, but try at least once. And then you learn, you have the resource, you feel comfortable with the process, and then you can use it when you need it again.
Lovely, Elizabeth. I just love those analogies. And I love that Ayurveda thing that there is preventive thing. You need not land up in a hospital in a catastrophe that it's going to be difficult for you also to handle and for the experts also to handle, because let's face it, coaches are not your nannies. They are not going to take care of your emotions. They are here for the legal aspect. They're here for the legal question. And let's not make our relationship go to that altar where we need to handle it legally. So I
Exactly.
think,
Because even my doctor, I see them annually for a checkup, right? Even if I'm healthy, they still check on
yes,
me, right? And
yes.
then if I get sick, then I go to the hospital, right? And I think mediators are really the doctors for relationships, right? Like, hey,
And
you
I
should
think
check in.
like you have your family doctor, like you have your family lawyer, to have a family mediator. What's the harm? It's not just a husband and wife couple having problems. There are so many having mother-in-law, father-in-law problems
Yeah.
out of family. In a
Yeah.
family, you have a lot of issues there. And what if a mediator is available and a mediation service is there, which is designated, which
Yeah.
you have a family mediator who knows you guys in and out and whom you can trust to be a confidential person and a neutral person. So why not? So
Exactly. 'Cause
I think
every cycle
it's
of a
time
family,
that yes, it's time
every
that
part of it.
people start thinking about it.
Yeah.
It's a professional service, and people should really start thinking about their conflicts not turning into disputes. So
Exactly.
any closing comments, because you really given us a lot of food for thought.
Yeah.
Yes.
And let's make that like
Any
really,
closing
let's make that a little more concrete, right? Like you should have a mediator when you're planning to get pregnant to figure out what are you going to
yes,
do during the pregnancy, during the birth, what does it look like to raise a child? Okay, now that child is a teenager. You can mediate with your teenager. You really need to do that. I've done that a lot for people. Okay, so now we've gotten through teenage years. Okay, let's mediate planning higher education or your career. Okay, now you're going to get married. Let's mediate the wedding. Let's make the wedding a collaborative planning process using mediation. Let's mediate between the families to find out if we really want to be family, right? Let's have the
yes.
couple mediate to decide if really this is the right decision. Okay, now you're married. Now let's mediate your housing. Let's mediate the intergenerational housing. Let's mediate the end of life planning for your elders. Let's mediate after the person dies. How are we going to keep their memory alive? How are we going to operate as a family now that we've lost this person, right? And then the cycle repeats. Now we're back to birth. So from birth to death, every single place, there are challenging conversations that if you do not communicate, things can go very badly, right? If you don't eat a healthy diet, things can go bad. Okay. So why don't in that process, you kind of have your annual check-in and say, you know what? We're in the phase of life where we're having kids or we're planning the elder care, right? No matter where you are in that cycle, it is important to have these conversations because they give you a roadmap for how to go through that situation so that no matter what happens, no matter how hard it is, you and your spouse or you and your family know your values, know what your plans are, know how to build understanding, know how to communicate. And that mediator is really there to write it down for you. Like we end up being the scribe, we hold space for it, we walk you through that process. And now it can only be it just makes it a better experience than if you try to muddle through it without communicating or you run into conflict and you don't get any support. So I wish that people would know that the courts don't need to be involved in every part of that life cycle. It doesn't have to be a
And
fight, but it can be
you need
something
a
we
trust
mediate.
and you need a trustworthy person who's going to be there for you, who's
Yeah.
going to be helpful. And just a service, like a family doctor, I said, like a family doctor, family mediator is so much necessary.
Yeah.
So it's time that people start thinking about it. I think this session of ours would give a meaning or a thought to this kind of a service coming up and people trusting the mediation services. And it may not be one single person. Maybe you have a mediation service and you have someone who will be taking care of human needs, like a super specialty hospital, taking care of the needs of people. That
Yeah.
that really was a lovely session, and I should thank you for making it a big success and bringing out what mediation actually is for a common person and what and why people all across the globe are switching over to mediation and they are talking about it, peaceful dispute resolution.
Hmm.
So, any closing comments for the younger generation, or we wind up
Yeah.
the
I mean,
session?
I hope we get to do this again because I love talking with you,
Yes,
Sunal. I think
likely.
if I can leave anyone with a message, it's just that you're not alone in your challenging conversations. They're 100% worth having, and you can get support. You can be supported in those challenging conversations by a mediator who will not judge you, who will meet you where you are, whose entire job is to just listen and to build that understanding. And so I hope people use it. I hope that even if they don't use it, they have those conversations and that they understand that they're going to be treated differently in court or mediation. You know, it's a different process. But if it's really about those interpersonal relationships, having those challenging conversations, mediator is a more appropriate method for that. And they don't need to be in conflict to come to mediation. They can just be collaborating and making collective decisions, and a
Yes,
mediator can make that process smoother.
and it's a perfectly normal service to avail, just like a florist, just like a
Yeah.
pre-shoot shooter,
Exactly. And that
pre-shoot.
definition of conflict, right? If conflict is when needs are unmet, needs go unmet all the time, all the time.
Yes,
So It happens. No one is ever going to have 100% of their needs met 100% of the time, right? So conflict is going to happen. Collaboration makes it more proactive, more engaging, and mediators can hold space and guide you through a process for that.
With those closing comments, let's end our beautiful conversation with promise that we'll be back with more such conversation with Elizabeth. And all the best for your all those models, and they are really an inspiration. And when I would think about making it a success here, I really love the idea that you gave.
Yeah, we'll have to all hum together. We will hum.
Yeah. I will stop the recording.
So we can